Hey, what's going on? My name is Eric Spencley and welcome to my apartment wood shop. So this space is about 10 feet wide and about 16 feet long, which is about 180 square feet. It's definitely not a massive space, but I think I've managed to get pretty good utilization out of it, and it works really well for everything that I make. This specific unit that I rent every month is part of a bay of garages in my apartment complex. So I'm not directly attached to any houses, and I'm actually about 100 or so feet away from the nearest apartment. So I know you're gonna ask, but no, I have never had any noise complaints. However, I typically only work my tools from the hours of about 9 or 10 a.m. to about 5 or 6 o'clock at night. So the majority of people aren't really home. So I think a perfect place to get started for this tour is along the back wall. Now the first thing you'll notice is that I utilize these studs as kind of a safety feature, and I have all of my large sheet goods packed between the studs so that if they ever want to try to fall, it's actually going to be supported by the stud itself. Now I don't keep a lot of sheet goods on hand because I really just don't have the space, but I always try to buy a little bit extra every time I go to the lumberyard. That way I have some stuff on backstock. In moving right along, the next thing that I have is this cast iron router table from Rockler. So the table itself is the cast iron table, and the lift is the Rockler Pro lift. Now I did have one issue with this setup from the very beginning, and that was that the router lift itself was actually warped, but I contacted the customer service and they got me a new one sent out, no problems asked. So if you ever have a Rockler issue, they'll help you out. Now all of that is sitting on top of this black steel Rockler stand. However, I completely customized mine with all these drawers and everything. And I actually have a full video on that and dedicated plans that walk you step by step of how to do it. But let's take a look at what's inside. So the first drawer I have is basically all of my 1/4 inch router bits. And then the drawer underneath is all of my 1/2 inch router bits. This is a spot on the inside where I can basically just pop this panel off and I can get complete access to the router underneath if I need to make adjustments to the router lift itself or maybe the speed of the router. On the opposite side is where I keep a lot of the tools. So these are gonna be like the collet wrenches, a spare collet, and stuff like that. Underneath that is where I keep some other accessories, like the bars that allow me to turn my router table into a joiner, as well as some sanding sleeves for spindle sanders and stuff that I can pop on there as well. Underneath that is where I keep all of my different insert rings to go around the different router bits, as well as push sticks and an auxiliary router fence of when I'm using my router outside of the router table. Now this is where I also keep my cordless palm router, and a lot of people ask about this Ryobi one. It's decent. I got it for free in the combo kit that I had. However, the one issue that I have with it is one, the balance is really weird on this. It always feels like it wants to fall this way when you hold it. Also, there is no variable speed, so you're just stuck with one speed. The adjustment on this isn't great, but I've found that if you absolutely crank this down so it's really tight, it stays pretty accurate, but it's not perfect. Now, the one issue that I really have with this is that the spot inside here that holds the collet itself, this piece here is the collet that holds the bit. And for some reason, these collets that come in this always break. I think I've gone through 5 to 10 of these so far with this router, and they're really cheap to replace, but it's just really frustrating that you buy a router and that it breaks like that. So wouldn't be the #1 tool that I'd suggest, but if you're in the Ryobi platform and you get a good deal on it, it's all right. Underneath that is where I keep some dust collection accessories, like just little tiny adapters or whatever, as well as a sanding mat that I'll set my pieces on so it doesn't slide all over the place, and just a bunch of other kind of miscellaneous junk that doesn't get used very often, like strap clamps or whatever. Next up, we have my flip top tool cart. And this is something that's very handy in my small space. It allows me to put my DeWalt 735 planer and my rigid combo sander in one small area, and I can easily flip between the two of them. Now, if you're somebody like me who's currently stuck in the 120 volt market because this is an apartment garage and I have no ability to upgrade the circuit board, I pretty much can't get a planer better than this one here. Now, when I first used it, it was great. However, the stock knives on it that are straight, I think I blew through those in about one project, and it seems to be total, polar opposites on that. You have some people who those straight knives last absolutely forever, and then you have others like me who basically went through them in like one day. So there seems to be a lot of inconsistency with that. But after I upgraded those straight knives to the helical cutter head, I really had no issues at all with this. And just like everything else I mentioned, I'm gonna leave links down in the description below to all of those different upgrades and projects, as well as all the plans for everything that you see in here. So this is no different, it's a link down in the description. And underneath the planer is where I keep the combo sander. Now this is the rigid combo sander that allows you to have both the belt sander attachment as well as the individual spindle attachment. And you've probably seen a ton of people have this in their shops. It's really cheap, it's like $200 and something compared to a lot of the larger ones that are several hundred to several thousands of dollars that are stainless steel. And honestly, this thing's kind of junky. It has a super low powered motor. It's not accurate. It's not really set at 90 degrees, and it's just really not something I'd recommend that anybody buy unless they can get a really good deal on it. Some people swear by this, but truthfully, not a big fan. Oh, before we move on, if you do want plans for this or just to see how this thing was built, there's a link in the description. So the next tool that we have on this back wall is my Delta 14-inch bandsaw. And this is the first bandsaw that I've ever used, so I may be a little partial, but honestly, for the money, this thing is solid. It's super heavy, it seems to be pretty accurate. It's got a cast iron table, and I'm pretty happy with it. Now, one thing that I did do to this that you're not gonna get right out of the package is I added this Kreg fence. This allows me to easily dial in any specific rip that I need, set the fence, and have it nice and accurate. Nice upgrade, and it's kind of a bummer this thing didn't come with the fence, but it's nice to know that you can easily add one. And down underneath, I made this mobile stand for the bandsaw so that it can slide around very easily, because this thing weighs like 150 or almost 200 pounds. So underneath it, the first thing that I have is a lot of featherboard stuff to help with the bandsaw itself. And the next thing I have under here is just some random CA glue and kind of bonus accessories that don't get used very often, like auxiliary dust masks. And at the very bottom of this is where I keep, again, miscellaneous stuff like shop vac bags, dust collector bags, and a staple gun. Oh man, it's getting hot in here. All right, pull it together. So in this back corner here is where I have all of my clamps. Now, I first started out by buying these cheap $2 clamps from Harbor Freight, and I still use these all the time. Just know that if you buy the really cheap clamps from the discount stores, they're gonna hold stuff, but you don't get as much clamping pressure, and they tend to bend and warp, and you can't get super accurate 90-degree clamping on stuff. But this is a fantastic place to start because they're very cheap. The other clamps that I got when I first started were, again, some more Harbor Freight bar clamps. These are an improvement over these because you can get a lot more clamping pressure with this. However, these are made out of aluminum, so when you get a lot of clamping pressure, you can see that you can completely twist this thing, and they're not great. But again, still a decent value for the money because these are like 12 to 15 bucks, so not bad. One thing that was a massive upgrade when I finally had the money to get them were some proper parallel clamps. Now, one of these clamps weighs, I think, 10 pounds, 7 to 10 pounds, and you get a massive amount of clamping pressure, as well as these faces here aren't gonna come at an angle, they're gonna be at a perfect 90-degree angle, so you're gonna get nice, even parallel clamping pressure, which is why they call them parallel clamps. And up above is where I store a lot of my smaller kind of hand clamps, like just regular spring clamps and whatnot. And then down below I have my woodpecker clamping squares. Now, I originally had these ones from Rockler, but I used them quite a few times and went to go put pieces together and then realized that these are not actually square at all. So truthfully, I don't even know why I still have them, but I upgraded to the woodpecker set, and sure, they're expensive, but it is super nice to have, to know that all of your stuff is going to go together at a 90-degree angle. And then the last thing that I have over in this general area is underneath all my clamps, I have all of my cauls, which are just wood boards covered in packing tape so that I can keep things nice and flat and get some even clamping pressure. And then next to my clamps is where I store my track for my Festool track saw. And coming away from that corner, we come to kind of the center of the shop, or right up in the ceiling. And that is where I have my DIY air filter. Now this is basically, well, not basically, it is just a box fan built around a little wooden enclosure with some filters that I have. And no, while it is not any like industrial strength unit or anything like that, it's helpful just to help filter a little bit of the air, and it was really cheap. So if you want to check out that video, I'll link that one in the description too. Now, before we get into the table saw and some of the other stuff that's right here, let's jump over to this corner of the shop that you probably never really see. Over here, I've got all of my tools that I tend to grab a lot, like my drills and my tool chest, as well as some safety items like safety glasses, earphones, and just dust collection and trash. So I have some extra hoses for the shop vac, as well as a blower to blow out all of the dust and everything. And then I just have a couple trash cans. The blower that I have that I blow all these sawdust out the door with is this Ryobi cordless blower. This thing was like 30 or 40 bucks and it works really well. So if you're already part of the Ryobi platform, this thing's a pretty good pickup. And I'm assuming you don't really care about the specific broom that I have, so let's just move on to some of the protection that I have. I really like these, I think 99-cent safety glasses that are from Harbor Freight because they're clear, they're really lightweight, and these ones are filthy. But if you break them or step on them, they're 99 cents, so who cares? And as far as hearing protection goes, I have several different styles. I first started out with these cheap over-the-ear earmuffs from Harbor Freight, and they work well, but after about 2 days of woodworking everything, I got really bored because I couldn't listen to music. So I stepped up to these 3M work tunes, and these are great headphones. The only problem is that if you work outside or in a space that's really hot, these make your ears sweat like crazy because they're completely covered. The protection's good, sound quality's pretty good. However, I then upgraded to these, which are the Elgin Ruckus earbuds. These have been great because they go inside your ear, don't cover everything up, and they protect you from all the noises as well as let you listen to music. However, about a month or two ago, they came out with an upgraded version that pretty much solved all the issues I had with these. Sometimes these would fall out a little bit. And these have an over-the-ear loop that helped them stay in your ear a little bit better. And moving on, I have my drills and my drill charging station. Now, the drills that I have two different sets. These are the Makita subcompact model that I really like because they're super small, really light, and still have plenty of power for what I do. And I also have the Ryobi brushless model. These are the original drills that I bought, and they work really well. There are a couple features that I wish these had that the Makita ones do. Like, for example, this impact only has one speed. So if you're trying to, put some smaller screws in, a lot of times you overdrive them, which can be a little bit annoying. But it's nice to have both sets because I don't have to constantly switch bits all over the place. Now, this specific tool holder is one from Perch. It is all completely stainless steel and it's super strong. It has a lot of attachment points where you can attach some of their other accessories, but I haven't fully outfitted that just because I don't have a lot of these cordless tools. Up above, I store all of my extra batteries as well as chargers. And I really need to find a better solution for this, and I really need to get some sort of wall-mounted system because this right now just doesn't look very good, but it's a temporary solution. And right next to my drill station is my tool chest. Now this is some super old Craftsman tool chest that I actually got from somebody who was unfortunately moving into an assisted care facility, so they had to get rid of all their tools. But it's gone to good use and I use this thing like crazy. And honestly, if there's one thing that I can suggest that you do if you're trying to save space, it's get a tool chest because you can pack a ton of stuff in a super small footprint. On the very top is where I keep the things that I use the most often. So I have larger pencils and markers, my more finer pencils. I have some of my countersink bits, other drill bits, playing cards for shims, tape measures, then various drill bits and driver bits and everything like that. So underneath that in this first drawer, I keep a lot of my woodpecker stuff. I have the 12-inch square, the saddle tee, the stainless steel delve square, the aluminum delve square, and then 2 of those mini squares that I really like a lot. Underneath the woodpecker stuff, I have another drawer, and this is where I keep some more woodpecker stuff with my precision triangle, the 12-inch rule, as well as the edge rule, and the Polini rule. And then this is where I have some of my original, what I consider like high accuracy measurement stuff. This is some of the stuff from Incra. It's basically thin sheets of, I think it's aluminum or steel or something, but it has all these holes on it that allow you to get all those exact measurements. This is something that if you're just starting out and want something a little cheaper, these are super nice. However, they have a little play in them, so they're not always super accurate. And underneath that drawer is where I keep some of my miscellaneous stuff. So I have calipers, some other, older squares and stuff that I don't use all the time, but it's still kind of nice to have. This is kind of a junk drawer for squares, if you will. And under that, this is where I have a little bit more kind of random stuff. I keep all of my Allen keys and everything like that here, as well as some sockets, some gloves, zip ties, and just an auxiliary screwdriver. This drawer doesn't really get used that much, but it's kind of nice to know I got it. And underneath that drawer, I have some of my, various hammers and whatnot, as well as some, pliers and vice grips and everything else, whatever you want to call it, as well as some really high quality chisels. The rustier they are, the better. And then razor blades, because I use razor blades a lot. And underneath that, and this final drawer on the top, is where I keep some double-sided tape, my hot glue gun, and some of these corner clamps here that I like to use that allow you to basically clamp on any miter. If you want to see the full video about how these are made and how they're used, I'll leave a link down to that in the description below. And to start the bottom of the tool chest, my top drawer here is basically all sandpaper. I have it separated out by individual grits, and I use quite a different variety of sandpaper. I'm testing a lot out, and I still haven't figured out which exactly is my favorite. So underneath that drawer is where I have a lot of my Craig hardware accessories and pocket hole jigs, as well as my gloves that I use for finishing, and some finishing pyramids that allow you to set things on top of them so they don't get messed up as you're finishing everything. So underneath that drawer is where I typically have my respirator, as well as just some other various tools like my jigsaw and my cordless sander. I also keep extra tape and everything in here, just kind of a back supply. These bottom drawers for the most part are just kind of auxiliary storage of things that I don't really grab that often, which is why at this bottom drawer, you'll see things like a heat gun, extra shop towels, an old respirator, some additional sockets and paper and everything like that. Nothing crazy, so let's move on from here. Oh, and while I'm here, this Ryobi sander is awful. When you first get it, it works really well, but I've actually gone through 12 of these sanders, and every single one has the exact same problem after you use it for a little bit. The like gears or whatever in here just completely detach. So when you go to sand it, instead of this rotating like it should, all it does is just vibrate and it stands completely still. So don't buy this sander, it's garbage. Now, one of the things I get the most questions about is this table saw. So why don't you come over here and I'll show you a little bit more. This table saw is a rigid prototype. I got this in about March of 2021 as part of testing some new tools that Rigid has coming out. Now, I don't actually know the real model number or anything, and I don't even know if this saw is gonna be out by the time this video releases. But Rigid sent me this saw to test, and it works pretty well. There are some complaints I have about it, mainly being that the auxiliary wings are really cheap stamped sheet metal, so they're not level at all and they, you know, bend and everything, but I'm gonna replace that in the future. But overall, it works pretty well and is substantially better than the job site table saw that I started out with. But if you wanna learn a little bit more about this saw, again, I have a whole nother video all about that. Oh my goodness, it's getting hot. And that brings me to the question that I get all the time, which is, do I have heat or air conditioning or any other form of climate control in here? And no, all I have is this fan up here, and I know it looks like it interferes with the air filter, but it works really well. This fan is able to pivot, which means I can have the air either blowing directly on me when I'm working at the table saw, or I can aim it over right where you're at by the camera, and when I'm by the bench, you know, marking out joinery or whatever, I can blow it on me there. So not a great solution, and I'd love to have something different, but I can't. And this is one thing that I really haven't mentioned at all until this shop tour video. If you're a close observer to all the stuff that I post, you might have noticed this white pipe. And, well, let me show you where that goes. So if we follow that all the way up the wall, you can see that it goes into the ceiling, and, well, that's where I have my dust collector. Now, this is one of the major advantages about this particular space. I'm in one of the center units, which means the roof is substantially higher. So I can put my ladder up here and I can go up above the rafters. Whew. Now, it is insanely hot up here since the heat rises, but this is where I have my dust collector, and this is one of those really, really cheap buck tool dust collectors. I mean, for like 200 bucks or whatever it costs, it's fine, but I don't think I'd really recommend it to anybody because it just doesn't have enough power really. But I keep the dust collector up here because it saves a ton of floor space. Now, I don't know how well it's gonna turn out up here, but up above, this is where I store some of my extra slabs, as well as you can see, this is where I store extra lumber and everything up here. So, you know, not the perfect solution, but it works. So let's head back down. And right down here next to my table saw is where I have my old table saw stand that held that old job site saw, but I kept this thing because it's really nice and it has some good storage. So on this top drawer, I keep a lot of just table saw accessories, things like push sticks, various push sticks, dado stack, extra table saw blades, feather board, and some additional wooden push sticks. Now underneath it is where I keep basically all of my hardware. So I have tons of different screws and pocket hole screws and nails and, you know, hardware. And underneath that is where I keep my angle grinder, which is my Arbortech power carving unit, as well as a nail gun and some additional drawer hardware. Now, coming over to the side of the table saw is something that I added. Now, since my dust collector is all the way up in the ceiling, I've got to find a way to turn it on. So I wired up the switch here, so all I do is flip it and the dust collector comes on. Now, underneath the left side of the table saw is where I have my miter gauge, and underneath the motor of the table saw is where I have my cyclone separator. That connects to my shop vac that's a little bit further back there, and it just keeps all of the big chips from clogging up the filters and filter bags inside that shop vac. And if you want to learn more about dust collection and what method is really right for you, I have an entire video all about different dust collection opportunities, so check that one out down in the description below. And coming off of my table saw, I have this big Outfeed table. Now this is really handy for me because, as you can see, I don't have like a secondary workbench or work surface, so this whole bottom shelf is where I set tools that I'm currently using and just need to have out of the way, or just extra work pieces. So down here, this is where I house my Festool domino. This is the smaller 500 size. And over here is where I house all the domino tenons that go with the domino itself. And over here, this is my Festool track saw. This is the TS55 version, and while I wish I had another place to put this, it works for right now, and when I need to get it out, I can just pull it out, but I really wish it were on drawer slides, but haven't done that quite yet. And for a shot that you probably never see, up above the garage door is where I made this lumber rack. This is where I'll put my full, 8 foot or so boards of my rough sawn hardwood, and it's pretty easy to grab the stuff with the ladder. Now you could probably see it a lot better when we're actually up in the ceiling, but this is the area up above where I keep a lot of my smaller scrap pieces that I might want to use up in a future project. And speaking of things that are kind of up in the ceiling, yes, I do have gas cans, and that's because my side business is I'm a door-to-door gasoline salesman.
Stop now. You can't do this.
Come on, man.
Only cars.
Oh, jeez. All right, well, mild card, do your thing.
Anyway, thanks so much for checking out the video, and I really hope you enjoyed the shop tour. Now, if you would like to help support the channel and pick up some exclusive merch like some of these folks up here, consider checking out my Patreon page where you can help me get one step closer to being able to quit my full-time job and continue to do these unsponsored videos. Anyway, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.